Hi everyone, welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast. This is the review of the German Grand Prix. We're going to get tucked into all the action highlights of this podcast. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week, and it was great to chew over the subjects of this latest round of the 2025 season. No, I'm just kidding. What we're actually going to do is we're going to make this podcast stretch out per minute to how many riders finished. So we've got to get everything done in 10 minutes, Dave.
That should be easy.
I'm Adam Wheeler. To my right is Mr. David Emmett. To my left is Mr. Neil Morrison. How are we, gentlemen?
Looking forward to Brno.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, we're sat in the kind of semi-abandoned press room here at the Sachsenring. People watching on YouTube will probably see some moving traffic behind as the paddock very quickly packs up and moves its way across to the Czech Republic, the first Grand Prix there in 5 years. But first, let's talk a little bit about what we've seen this weekend and, of course, today in a very sort of unpredictable set of conditions, it has to be said. Dave, first of all, let's just do a quick overview of what we saw in terms of results. Marc Marquez, as he kind of forecast on Friday, working towards a dry setting and level of performance, taking another victory, his fourth in a row, finishing Neil once again ahead of his brother in second place. Pecco making the third spot on the podium. As we mentioned, just 10 finishes from this Grand Prix, so quite a lot of crashes. Only 18 riders started the Grand Prix. We'll get into a few of the sort of narratives surrounding those results. But I want to ask you for your moment first. What was the thing that stood out most for you from this particular race?
I mean, my moment was really the rain on Saturday, because that really conditioned so many things for the rest of the weekend. It ruined everyone's setup. It provided a fantastic sprint race. Fantastic. All right, let's not get carried away with ourselves. For a sprint race, it was fantastic. It was a really good sprint race. It was really interesting. Marc Marquez messed up. It took him a few laps to sort himself out, and then he came through the field in a very, very impressive display. We had some interesting racing. I think the rain on Saturday was really made the weekend for me.
Neil, he's starting to pick rain as a moment from his races. So we get worried about this?
Yeah, I was worried after he picked fireworks in the Dutch TT review. It made me think that his old age is gradually catching up with him. I jest, Dave, of course. I think we should be worried, but then we've been worried, I think, ever since we've known our friend Dave to be fair. And I guess to go on to my moment, my moment was probably the last lap of the sprint, because as Dave said, it was the best sprint of the year. So far, it was like, maybe it wasn't classic, but I think by the standards set by the sprints in the last year and a half, it was a classic. There was like a bit of jeopardy that sort of went all the way up until the final lap of the race. And Marc's overtake on Bezzecchi up at turn one was just, we had heard so much before the race that he was going to think about the championship in really tricky, risky conditions. And he said afterwards he just couldn't help himself. He took probably more risk than was absolutely necessary. And we shouldn't really be surprised at this point in the championship at the Sachsenring. What followed today on race day was a real formality, wasn't it, from the very early stages?
Dave, we were puffing out our cheeks and rolling our eyes when Marc was talking about sacrificing some flying laps on Friday to get everything ready for a potentially dry sort of 30 lapper. And it felt like a lot of laps as well, didn't it?
It always does, because it is such a short circuit. 30 laps is a lot anyway, but it really does feel like it feels like a really, really long race, because you're just going round and round and round and round and round.
I mean, this was Marc's fourth win in a row, but because of his statement on Friday, and then as Neil pointed out from his moment, just attacking straight into the Grand Prix today. I mean, he took the whole shot and that was it. The race was over.
Yep.
It feels a little bit like, I don't want to say a piss take, but it was almost just this remarkable display of domination. Probably the most authoritative performance yet.
Yeah, absolutely. This was classic Marc Marquez. This was Doohan-esque, and I don't mean that in a good way. This was. He said also in the press conference that he had to be strong in his good days, and this was a place to attack. He knew that he could attack, so he did attack and take sort of the maximum. And he didn't even other places he's been sort of he's kept Alex at a couple of seconds just to make it interesting. And like here, he was not keeping anyone. He was just like making sure he wasn't going to crash and making sure that everyone knew that he was much faster than everyone else.
It was a long race, and in fact, just to deviate for a moment, my moment from the Grand Prix, in fact, came also on Saturday because Maverick Vinales' crash in the first minute of Q2, for me, set a little bit the template, because in recent weeks, I think the Spaniard has come closer, or is looked more likely out of the non-Ducati brigade to be actually able to do something about upsetting, the Italian influence on MotoGP. I'm not saying he would have come anywhere near Marc Marquez, but the fact that Maverick crashed out like he did, and then obviously broke a ligament in his left shoulder through the separation, the dislocation he had, and now looking incredibly doubtful for the Grand Prix next weekend at Brno as well. I just felt that was like a big setback. I mean, I know you were sort of pretty disappointed as well, Neil. It was it felt like the MotoGP field was weakened by that.
Yeah. I mean, there was only 18 starters and then 8 riders crashing in the race. So it was certainly a war of attrition. Just 10 finishers, and I need to check when the last time. Sorry, a low level of finishers in the Premier class. But I think you're probably going back. Well, maybe to the CRT days, I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe even before that. I mean, like maybe even sort of the end of 2000, of the 800s era, where we were sort of like starting the races with 17 bikes.
Trying to think of a Grand Prix that was excessively rain hit. That probably would have been the best bet for the lowest number of finishes. Maybe in Le Mans one year, but yeah, I mean that was also when I mean the race was long, there was a fairly kind of large period where there was just a stasis, wasn't there, Dave? There wasn't much happening at all, but then suddenly riders decided to start falling off, mainly around turn 1. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it was basically sort of, 15, 16, 17 laps of not much happening. It's one of those laps where you look at it, the best way to watch it is via the live timing and seeing who's catching up a 10th or losing a 10th. It could have been a bit more exciting if Fabio Di Giannantonio hadn't decided to launch it into the scenery, if Marco Bezzecchi hadn't decided to launch it into the scenery. There could have been a little bit of a battle, not for first, but at least for second. But I mean, there were some pretty good battles much further back, Luca Marini versus Jack Miller sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, you were really stretching around, and it was my pet theory for why so many people were crashing was because they were basically sort of dozing off through the tedium and forgetting that they were heading into turn 1 and having to brake.
Marc Marquez, that was his 200th Grand Prix start, in the Premier class. 94 victories, Neil, putting him up to, was that second on the all-time list?
So in the Premier class, yeah.
Yeah, just one notable name ahead of him to aim for. Was that 69 wins, in the Premier class, 94 career victories. 4 in a row, Dave, as we were mentioning. The Marc Marquez shadow is just like getting longer and longer over 2025 MotoGP. Yeah,
also, this was his 200th, I think his 200th Premier class GP, and he's got 120 podiums, which is, 60% of the podiums. In MotoGP, he is 34.5%. I think he wins 34.5% of the races he starts. So he's really stamping his authority on this.
Would you say I'm inaccurate by saying that in most of the Grand Prix we've seen this year, since he's been on the GP25, he's looked good and comfortable, but not completely at home? I mean, today he said that he was enjoying the motorcycle. And also, he didn't ride anything like anywhere. I think over 70% was a figure he mentioned. He looked completely in control.
Yeah, and he was. He said afterwards that he wasn't at his limit throughout the race. He said his limit was kind of around the 1 minute 20.3, 1 minute 20.4 lap times. And when you go through his lap by lap analysis, I mean, the kind of fastest he was doing was half a second slower than that. And even, sometimes 7-8 tenths of a second slower than that as well. So he wasn't even close to his limit when you think about it. Yet he still managed to win the race by over 6 seconds, which shows you just how much, or just how dominant he was. It was interesting listening to Di Giannantonio afterwards. I think you asked him just, what was his impression of following Marc, and he said, it's so easy here on a massive MotoGP bike on such a narrow track with such a strange and demanding layout where you're just going left all the time. He said it's so easy to just maybe go wide by 1 meter or just miss an apex here or there. He said Marc was just absolutely perfect. There was no mistakes whatsoever, and anytime Digia thought that he was making just a little bit of progress to get towards him at the front, he would make a mistake being just about missing an apex, and Marc was just, a tenth here, a tenth here, a tenth here. I think Brad Binder said on Friday that this is a track that if you took 50 horsepower off a MotoGP bike, you wouldn't notice it at all. So, you're talking about pretty crazy bike that you're having to try and tame around this layout, where they can't really stretch their legs, and Marc was just doing it so effortlessly. So it wasn't a surprise. We were coming here saying who's going to be finishing second, and we weren't really being sarcastic or sly.
It was just glib about it.
It's a guy that's won 11 times here in the past, it was a formality pretty much from the moment that he took the lead into the first turn.
David, during the race, I was thinking, would it be too cheeky to say to Marc, are you making MotoGP boring? But then I reminded myself that we should be appreciative of the fact that the story he's creating in 2025. I even said to you at one point, when could he theoretically win this championship? It could be before the flyaways.
It could
at
be
this
Visano.
rate. Yeah, that's ridiculous. But then also, again, we had to remind ourselves that we're watching a master of the art at, essentially his home turf, in terms of spiritual way of riding a motorcycle. I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is his perhaps his strongest track. He's clearly the best rider in the world. He is clearly on the best bike in the world / terms and conditions apply. But the Ducatis are all clearly the best bikes. His main rival is his teammate, who is struggling, who can't really do anything on the bike. The rider who should be his main rival is his teammate. The rider who is his teammate, or who is his main rival, his brother, is just frankly not as good as Marc Marquez. But then, not being as good as Marc Marquez it's not much of a slur, because it's not much of an insult, given that encompasses pretty much the entirety of the human race.
I like the fact as well that Alex Marquez, let's talk about him, because, we've written and spoken more about him, in the first 5 months of this season than I think we've probably done in the last 5 years, of MotoGP racing. And he came to this race slightly injured, of course. He's not far from 100% fit. His left hand looks kind of swollen and pretty ugly, even though you could say it's not the most debilitating injury. He was wearing a guard just to protect bangs rather than, trying to limit any movement or whatever else. But we have to, guys, give him more and more credit, because he came to talk to us on Thursday and put his hand up and said finishing second to Marc Marquez is not a bad thing. And I don't think he kind of intimated it before, but then that kind of racer part of him didn't want to sort of concede defeat at that point, as if to say, yeah, my brother's going to beat me every single weekend. He'd been just like, we have to stay there, we have to stay in the championship, but coming to this race hurt and being realistic that we were at the Sachsenring, I think Alex was just being a little bit more rounded about the situation.
Yeah, without question. I think on Saturday after the sprint, he said, okay, we finished down in, 8th, was it, in the sprint race? But, we were ahead of Pecco. And already you get the impression that he's thinking about, how do I maintain this second place in the championship, rather than really believing that he can overhaul his brother to finish first. And, I don't think that's news. It's probably been the case for the whole season, to be honest. But, nonetheless, it was still a very, very impressive performance from Alex. He did get somewhat lucky with the second position, because, Di Giannantonio had second place sewn up pretty much. Bezzecchi, would have been a surefire, I think, for second had he not crashed as well. So it was given to him in some respects. But Yeah, considering what happened just 2 weeks ago in Essen, and there being some doubts as to whether he would actually be here in Germany, maybe not so many, but some doubts as to whether he would be, fighting fit and able to be competitive. It was still a really strong ride, and he said he was a little bit too cautious on the Saturday in the rain. The doctors had implored him coming here, don't crash. It could make the injury really, really complicated. So he had that in his mind, but. Yeah, in the dry conditions, he was a lot more comfortable. And his 50th career podium in his 100th Grand Prix or MotoGP start today. It's pretty good going when you consider how long you're hanging off the left of the bike from turn 4 all the way around to turn 10. And you're not able to really give that left hand any kind of break whatsoever.
It seemed like Alex Marquez gained some credit back, Dave, after some frustration in recent races that he hasn't really shown his brother more of an aggressive kind of streak. I mean, we have to be fair to him, and challenging Mark is not exactly the easiest job in MotoGP. But I think he came here with a decent mindset, and on the face of it, he lost minimal points.
Minimal points for someone with a hand injury, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, both Alex Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia were helped by the fact that Digia and Bezzecchi crashed out in front of them. Pecco was quite funny, saying it seems like it doesn't really matter where I start, I always end up third. And you could say pretty much the same for Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez is pretty much got he's laid. We're in Germany. Like a good German beachgoer, he's laid his towel on the seat for second place before the start of the race, and make sure to claim it afterwards. He did say, like, finishing second, he said basically, I have no business being in this fight. I should not be second in the championship. His main rival is Pecco Bagnaia, his teammate. The other person who should be challenging him is Fabio Di Gianantonio, who's on exactly the same bike. But I'm on a year-old bike in an independent team, and Grassini really is probably the only truly independent team, given that all the others have much more factory support, and yet he's there, week in, week out. He's challenging there. I mean, Alex is now 83 points behind Mark. Pecco is 147 points behind Mark.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah, so the gap between Alex and Pecco is much closer than the gap between Mark and Mark and the rest. Basically, we're halfway through the season, 11 races. Alex now needs help from someone else if he wants to win the title. He can't just, even if he won everything else for the rest of the season, we're getting to the point where he's starting to need help from others.
MotoGP took a bit of a battering this weekend, right? I mean, Alex Marquez was riding injured. Luca Marini, we could see him at various points just trying to shake out some sort of arm pump or cramp or discomfort.
Yeah, he said cramp in his back. He was lifting his leg off his right level because you're hanging off the left so much. And he was trying to favour. He's got no strength in the left side of his body, so he was just trying to get rid of cramp.
Yeah, the whole Red Bull KTM Tech 3 team were wiped out. Maverick Vinales went to hospital, as we mentioned, in Bastianini battling an appendicitis. Franco Morbidelli went with a contusion to his left collarbone, I think. But then you would have to imagine, Neil, that was probably one of the most horrific crashes we've had this season. That there are other underlying. I mean, he's going to be pretty sore. Being able to compete again in 6 days' time is going to be a bit of an ask. Yeah, you would say so. You would have to imagine he's pretty badly concussed as well after seeing that crash. I mean, it was horrible. Very relieved to hear that the left collarbone contusion was the kind of extent of his injuries. When you saw him kind of being thrown through the gravel trap like a rag doll. I mean, it was a bit like Rainey-esque. You think back to Rainey's crash in Misano in '93, and obviously the terrible sort of effects or the terrible injuries he sustained from that. He just kind of landing on his head a couple of times as he barrel rolled through the gravel. So the leathers are ripped open too. Leathers opened as well. So it was pretty awful. Hope that Franco is relatively okay. Obviously, he's had a few big concussions in the past as well. Guys, why were there so many crashes today? I mean, what were the riders telling us in the debriefs afterwards?
Lots of reasons. I mean, Marc Marquez explained it best in the press conference, but there were lots of reasons. For a start, the rain. This was one of the things. The rain meant that the riders lost a whole day of practice on Saturday. Also, when you come off rain tyres, because I think warm-up was also wet as well, so they're going straight from rain tyres onto slicks, and that makes the bikes feel really, really heavy. It makes the bikes feel completely different.
Yeah, so Mark said it felt like the bike weighed 200 kilograms when he first sat on it in the race, the first lap or two.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got the tailwind up the straight, which was pushing them all towards turn one. The weather was weird. You had to take the hard front because it was warm enough that the hard front would work and you really needed the hard front to get to make it through all of the lefts. But then at the right hand side, it would be sort of. It was a bit tricky. It was difficult, and this is just a track where there's a few places where it is tricky. For example, turn one, where you've got sort of a little bit of a crest and then a drop, and then you're turning, and it only takes a very, very small mistake to have a big effect.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've seen some big, significant crashes there in years gone by. You think back to Bagnaya's crash out of the victory fight in 2022. You think of Jorge Martin crashing out of the lead 2 laps from the flag in last year's race.
Marc and Zarco.
Right, yeah, Marc and Zarco.
Zarco pretty much lost. Well, I mean, Marc took a Ducati in half.
Right, yeah, exactly. That was, I think, free practice 2 years ago when he was still on the Honda. And, Dave said about the track conditions, I think the race was about 3 seconds slower, or almost 3 seconds slower than last year's race winning time. So track conditions weren't ideal. And then I think also we just saw some kind of weird crashes. Dijan Antonio said he braked 5 meters later and had 2 degrees of more lean angle than previous laps, and that was enough for him to tuck the front there. And then Bezzecchi afterwards said that he thought, okay, Dijan Antonio's just crashed. I need to sort of just take it easy in this corner, and was kind of a little less intense and aggressive than previous laps. And he said then the front just tucked away. He said it's kind of another example that these bikes are made to be ridden at the absolute ragged edge all of the time, and when you back off a little bit, then it sort of tucks and goes away. And then we had Zarco, who had weird issues with his front tire.
Yeah, exactly. Zarco basically said that they'd set the pressure a little bit too low, not because they were expecting, not because of the position they were expecting to be in, but it turned out it was still just because of the conditions. It was colder. He started losing temperature out of the front, and out the front side, the tire temperature dropped too low, and he just basically lost it. The other thing that the rain did was it washed all the rubber away, so you're coming back to a green track as well. There's no rubber on there, and there's nothing to do. And I don't think we can particularly blame it on the Michelins either, because there were a lot of crashes in Moto 2. Yeah, in Moto 2. Not quite so many in Moto 3, but there were quite a lot in Moto 2.
Yeah, and it's maybe not one of the more challenging corners on the whole calendar, but it is still a very, just by the nature of the layout of the track, you've got that sort of rise, and then you're kind of going down again before you're in there, and it's very easy for the rear wheel to come up just a little bit and get the bike unsettled going in. So it's I think historically, like I was previously saying, it's just one of those corners which always sees a bit of trouble.
It has been raining a lot. I mean, last night the rain was coming down. I could hear it on the hotel window, and then this morning, waking up at like 6:30 a.m., it was really sloshy outside. So the kind of summer seasonal storm that we've had here, it didn't help things at all. But then, on the other hand, it made quite a sort of static Grand Prix quite exciting for a while. I mean, first of all, we're glad that most of the people that came off the bike today are reasonably okay. But at one point, we had, Ayagura taking out poor Joan Mir, who didn't make it to the checkered flag once again. And then Lorenzo Savadori going straight into the gravel, for the second time in a race?
When I think with the yellow flags were out for the Mir and Agura incident, so give himself a long lap penalty.
He gave himself I think a double long lap penalty to be served at the next race, but we don't know what his next race is going to be, because we're expecting Jorge Martin to be back at Brno.
Smart.
Exactly.
Well, it's actually, I mean, Martin's return has been like this kind of little bright narrative with everything that's going on behind it. But now we actually kind of need him back.
Yes.
Because you're in another situation where test riders and substitute riders are going to have to dust off the levers. The likes of maybe Paul Espargaro, certainly. They're going to have to be coming back into play. Interesting that, Paul might be riding again in Brno because he was fighting for the win there the last time MotoGP was there. Wasn't he taken out by Joan Zarco?
Should have won the race. And crashed out at turn 2 and then was absolutely devastated. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he was happy enough for Brad Binder to have taken his first win, but he was devastated to not be KTM's first victor, I seem to recall.
It was with Zarco, wasn't it? The lines came together and... Yeah, it was a strange crash. Well, it's one of those Brno crashes because the corners are so wide and the lines come back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Brno is very much like Mugello in that respect, where there's sort of multiple lines through there, but it does mean that you can actually end up with intersecting lines and riders hitting each other.
Props to our listeners and followers on Patreon, because we like to ask you to submit questions right after the Grand Prix, and we get questions in sort of from across the globe, so people who are either staying up late to watch the race or watching it extremely early. Nick Saban and John Spizzano were saying, what do we make of the crashes in MotoGP, especially late in the race? Some riders said tyre degradation, but the conditions look good, but then... As you pointed out, Dave, the tailwind, the temperatures, Joan Zarco's experience, Brad Binder telling us with these particular set of tyres, you need 3 laps out of the box just to get them up to a working temperature. And in the case of, say, Pedro Acosta, he was pointing out that the tyre and KTM RC16 combination at the moment leaves... The room for error is minimal.
Yeah.
So if you make just a tiny little slip, then you're going to be in the gravel.
Yeah, and exactly. And as Fabio Di Gianantonio was saying, like, it's so easy around here just to make the tiniest little error, which puts you a little bit wide. And in conditions like this, where you're sort of caught in between 2 temperature zones, if you like, you're caught in between. You're caught on a track without the rubber of a whole race weekend. You would have you're caught in strange conditions without much practice time in the dry. Very small mistakes happen easily, and small mistakes then turn into big crashes.
We've got some more listener questions coming up, but one other topic I want to ask you guys is, based on today, who do we kind of think is the most interesting rider in MotoGP at the moment? I mean, we talked about the Marquez, and several other individuals, but is there anybody else just based on what they're doing?
Devil's advocate?
Go on.
Jorge Martin.
Based on today, so Jorge's at home, with his feet up.
Yeah, no, I mean fair enough. Because we're finally going to get to see that maybe what Jorge Martin is good. Marco Bezzecchi had a really, really good race. Marco Bezzecchi's been very, very good on that Aprilia. The bike is getting better and better. Pedro Acosta, again, he's mercurial. There's something there, but it's just not coming out. And Fabio Quartararo, who is just absolutely gagging for a spot of V4 action.
I'm going to mention the guy who's third on the podium, the double world champion. Yes.
Please, how is that exciting?
Because,
how is that interesting?
Can I explain? Is
yes.
that okay?
No. Yeah,
please,
you go ahead and explain.
Right, I mean...
And then we'll shoot you down.
I want to know how Pecco comes back from this. Because, he was explaining to us across the weekend that he was trying a chassis that he had tried at the Malaysia test that he said he didn't want to use, but he was trying again. Then he flipped back once more. He's been, 5 times third place now. And oddly, if you look at his career stats, this has been one of his most consistent first half of the season. But the problem is, his teammate has been wiping the floor with him.
Yeah.
And from a mental point of view, because we're asking Pecco questions every single race or weekend, where does he go from this? Because he could be facing another 18 months of this kind of positioning.
Yeah, I mean, I had a quick chat with someone in his team earlier this week, and they said, we're not that far off. It's just we just need 2 or 3 more small steps, and they have made small steps. He is looking much better. He's looking much more comfortable than he was at the start of the season. He's not looking as just absolutely despairing, but he is just no match for Marc Marquez. And even if he gets his mojo back, even if he gets everything back, then he has the problem of trying to take on Marc Marquez on this bike. He doesn't have a better bike; he has the same bike, and then we get into a completely different world. But he's seeking something, and it's going to end up being something like an extra 1 mil of foam on his seat.
The Jorge Lorenzo tank mod.
No, yeah, exactly. No, it is. He's such a sensitive rider that these small details can make massive differences. So they're searching around for that one detail.
On Saturday in the sprint, he took his worst ever classification, finishing the race. He shouldn't have been on the podium today, Neil. He made it happen, but can we be simplistic?
Well, Fabio Di Giannantonio and Marco Bezzecchi made it.
Well,
happen.
you've got to stay on the bike to finish, haven't you?
Yeah,
but I'm saying,
fair.
Is it as simple enough as boiling it down to the fact that Marc Marquez is better than a guy who's won 30 to 40% of the Grand Prix over the last 3 seasons?
Well, no, I mean, he's today was a good ride, and when you contrast it to Saturday was just awful. I think he said he was speechless at the end of that performance. He said if it's a wet race on Sunday, he's going to finish 40 or 50 seconds back of Marc, which was a pretty painful admission for him to make. No feeling in the wet whatsoever. It wasn't as if his speed in the dry was amazing, but he had a pretty consistent ride, coming through from 10th to 3rd. I mean, it was a solid performance, and he did say in the press conference afterwards, the last 3 rounds, it doesn't look like it, but there has been progress, there has been improvements. He was saying on Thursday, going back and looking over his Assen performance, he was the fastest guy there. He obviously wasn't able to make it work in the race, and that was on him, and it was still pissing him off when he was coming here to Germany. But at least at Assen, from the first session of the weekend to the race, he felt he probably had the best rhythm. Now, you could obviously make criticisms at him not translating that into a race win. I think there's kind of signs of it here. Maybe we would have seen further progress had he not lost a full day to the weather on Saturday. I mean, he's still 7 seconds off a rider that was cruising, essentially, and was nowhere near touching his own limit today. So that shows the kind of challenge that lies ahead.
Could we be even more judgmental, perhaps, in Czech Republic? Because that's a little bit more of a level playing field. I mean, I know Marquez has raced there far more than Pecco Bagnaia has in the Premier class, but he hasn't on a Ducati. Pecco has. Maybe there'll be it's not Marc at the Sachsenring. That's what I'm trying to say. We could see Pecco perhaps a little bit more feisty or competitive.
I think it's much more like going to a new circuit. Also because it's been resurfaced, and if it's correct that the Yamahas were circulating sort of like 2 seconds of a lap faster than the lap record from 2020, because it's 5 years since we've been there. That's a long time. There's been a lot of racing. A lot of things have happened since then. Obviously, Marc Marquez wasn't even there in 2020 because he'd already destroyed his arm. So there really is.
And Pecco messed up his leg in the first session of the weekend.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like there is so much. There are so many unknowns that I think it's going to be the track surface is going to be completely different. It's going to feel completely different. The layout might work. I think it's going to be like almost going to a new track. The trouble is, who's really good when we go to new tracks?
Neil, have you got an interesting rider in MotoGP?
I mean, if we're looking at kind of this weekend and maybe the situation that surrounding it, Fabio Quartararo, I think, is kind of interesting, because you look at Saturday, 3rd position in the rain, came through from 7th on the grid. Really good performance. Fabio, is so hot or cold, kind of like Yamaha as a whole, in wet conditions. It's either excellent, like he's finishing 2nd in Indonesia a couple of years ago, in the rain behind Miguel Oliveira, or he's nowhere and bemoaning the lack of kind of feel. But said the grip conditions were decent in the wet and had a really mature ride. I think it was one of the more impressive performances of Saturday. And again, you look on the paper and it's 4th place. At a track that maybe hasn't been good for him in the last 2 years. I know he won here last time he won in 2022. But there was that sort of gaping chasm between the victor and his Yamaha, 18.7 seconds at the checkered flag. And, there was no sense that Fabio was happy at the end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
There is this kind of narrative about the V4 and its development kind of constantly going behind the scenes. We heard, Alex Rins talking about that being tested at Brno when they were there last week after Assen. And, Fabio says it would be nice to race the V4 next year, but at the moment the V4 is nowhere near competitive enough. He said, it has the potential to be good, but, testing times or some way off the inline for. And I don't know, I think I brought this up over the weekend in one of our note shows, but yeah, you're just getting the impression that he's losing a bit of patience.
Yeah, he was agitated, right? I mean, we saw him at the end of warm-up as well. You kind of think, Fabio, it's a 10-minute session, but he was highly kind of irritated by something.
We saw on Friday also that I think again, he had problems with the ride height device. The Yamaha have a new ride height device this year, and we saw what happened at Silverstone. We've seen it happen multiple times. It's extremely sensitive, and it's a bit fragile. It keeps bringing leaks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that, as you say, it keeps happening. And he's been bemoaning the fact that their electronic setting has not been where it needs to be the last couple of race weekends. And I kind of feel like this time a year ago, Fabio was in this honeymoon period with Max Bartolini and the kind of new approach that he was bringing from Ducati, saying things like, we're not showing it, but Max's approach and how many risks he's taking, how he's changing the Japanese engineers' working method is really something to behold. And I can kind of see the light with this. It's going to bring us success. And then we had a situation in Assen 2 weeks ago where he said, Max is under pressure now because he needs to show me in the next season and a half that, Yamaha has got it within itself to provide me with a winning package for 2027, And I don't know, he's kind of given indications that at the moment he's not convinced to sign on with Yamaha for another 2 years at the end of next year.
There was a team manager's press conference over the weekend. There were two of them. There should have been a lot more, but we won't go into that too deeply. But Paolo Bavesio did say that we do expect that sort of the idea is, if everything works, that they will race the V4 as quickly as possible. The plan is to do it next year, but only if the thing is competitive, so they do still have it. The trouble is, it's difficult to look at lap times of the V4. I mean, they've just finished reliability testing, basically. They're now starting to do proper performance testing. But the trouble is, we've got Andrea Dovizioso, who is a fantastic tester, but slow because he hasn't raced for a long time. They've got Augusto Fernandez, who, having been out of racing, has also lost a lot of time and really needs to be doing more racing to actually sharpen his reflexes, sort of thing. So it's a bit of it's hard to say how good the bike is. I think we will see the bike at Misano. I think Alex Rins hinted that they'd have the bike at the Misano test, and if we see Rins, Quartararo on the V4, then especially if we see Quartararo on the V4, then we really get an idea of what it's going to be like.
Yeah, Yamaha are in a bit of a strange bind because, I sense that Quartararo in his debriefs this weekend is losing patience, of having to perform well above, what he determines as a limit. Alex Rins as well. Didn't really have much to say in terms of what he was doing on the track, but the comments he was making, he seems to be extremely shackled by the motorcycle at the moment. And then on the Prima Pramac side, I think you see a team that's still in the honeymoon period of being kind of more factory than they were in the past. But then you have a strange situation where the two riders are kind of unsure on their future, or that they're telling us. And then you have an incoming rookie, although one of the most talented and naturally capable riders on the world scene for 2026. It's just like a big kind of turbine of different scenarios, different approaches. It must be hard to align all of that and get the sort of dedication that you need, because also this weekend, just to contrast, Red Bull KTM on their side and the work with Aki Ayo, who's been in place as team manager and overseeing that project for only half a season, not even that. He's trying to calm the whole thing down at KTM, the sense of panic that the results aren't coming, and make everything a lot more systematic. Brad Binder was talking a little bit about this today to us in the press, saying that, we're not testing as much and we're focusing much more on what we can do rather than scurrying around for technical solutions and getting confused, taking one direction and coming back. There seems to be a lot more of a single kind of line, and you can tell that just by the configuration of all the KTM RC16s now.
Exactly. If you went into pit lane, you'd see 4 different KTMs. Now you're basically seeing not quite 4 the same, because Bastianini still doesn't have the engine torque valve on the exhaust pipe, but the rest are pretty much identical, and it's being left up to the riders to actually sort things out. This is common. This is also what Jorge Martin liked to do. He didn't like to have. He would test during pre-season, find a base setting, and then just ride the base setting, and only bring updates when it worked. Pecco Bagnaia is a little bit more conservative like that as well, which is why he doesn't like bringing new chassis, why he's still on the old aero. But yeah, the rider is still a really important part, but the rider has to be able to extract the most out of needs to be able to extract the most out of the bike, and they can extract the most out of the bike when they actually focus on it, work on it, and spend time on it.
Just before we get to the listener questions section of the show, a quick reminder, we're backed by Renthal.com. They have a Fit My Bike configuration tool on the website. So you're after some handlebars, bars, clip-ons, chain wheels, then go to Renthal.com, use that particular tool, and you'll be able to get exactly what you need for the motorcycle that you have in your garage. Pole position travel as well, guys. If you're looking for a fantastic experience at a World Superbike round or a MotoGP Grand Prix, then pole position travel can sort out everything, not just accommodation and transport, but also hospitality, guidance, and ensuring basically any kind of factor of a trip to a Grand Prix. Good entertainment, some dodgy after dinner speakers sometimes, but there's not too much they can do to control that. So pole position travel, and we have a code for listening to the Paddock Pass podcast. Enter PPOD25X and you'll get a small discount on any bookings that you make. Right. Listener questions. One from VJ. He wants to know, why hasn't a corner been named after Marc yet at the ring?
Because you can't name one corner after him. You have to name the entire thing the Marc Marquez Sachsenring.
The Markenring.
The Markenring, yes.
Neil, are you like a fan of corner naming in general? Or you do stand with Valentino on this?
I have absolutely no opinion on this whatsoever.
No.
I am not a fan of name. I'm certainly not a fan of naming corners after active riders. I'm not really a fan of naming them after riders at all. I like the old-fashioned ones, like Mugello, like Assen, which are named after villages, or Silverstone, named after villages in the area.
Yeah, not a bad suggestion. Dave, this one's for you from Paul McMullen. If Ducati choose to use the 2024 bike for 2026, would Marc still have the same relative advantage over Pecco and Alex? Did Marc ever ride the 24 in testing?
I don't think he did. I'm not sure. He might have done,
sure he did.
I'm fair. He might have done a few laps, but not very much. There was no point, basically. The closest he's come to riding the 24 is the bike he's on now, more or less, the bike he's on now with the chassis he started the season on. If everyone goes on the GP24, same result. I mean, it isn't the bike that's making the difference.
Can we petition Ducati course to have a blinking light on the GP26 so we know what actually bike is going to be racing next year and in what hands? Because it'll make things a lot clearer for us. Neil, DJ Purchase, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, says, after the summer break, who will score more points, Bez or Martin?
It's a good question, yeah. And maybe I should apologise for cutting down your question about corner names. I did sound a bit... you
sound like a man who's at the end of a Grand Prix weekend.
I did. I sounded like a man that is ready for his summer holidays, I think. But yeah, it's a good question because, Martin was still in the situation in Qatar when he was playing with ergonomics on the bike, with seating position, with where he sat. And, it is easy to forget that he's basically going to be going into Brno like it is the Sepang test, essentially. It's probably like day 3 of the Sepang test. And there's still a whole lot of adaptation to get into. And let's be honest, Bezzecchi has been doing very well recently. He's been performing at a very consistent level now for the last couple of rounds. So I think Bezzecchi is probably in line to outscore Martin in the second half of the year.
I would slightly disagree and say it's more like the Buriram test, because he did have a day on the bike at Misano last week where they were able to work on some ergonomics and stuff. But yeah, absolutely, it's very much like he's just about at the end of the pre-season testing and starting the season proper.
Well, he did have 19 laps in Qatar as well.
Yeah, he did. Yes, and he did have he did have some practice sessions, and he had some and he had a sprint race. But yeah, I think he had. I don't think it's a fair question. Also, because Bezzecchi's in good shape right now. I think Bezzecchi's going to do well in certainly the first half of the second half of the season. So that would be the third quarter of the season. I think it's going to be much more interesting. That last section of the season is going to be much more interesting.
Yeah, just don't ask him about his aero. What's different about his bike? Otherwise, you just want to give him a slap. Next question. Tim Chiesa says, "What is KTM getting out of Pedro Acosta? It seems he's not really pushing development and he keeps throwing his bike away. Are they just hoping his talent will bring them success when the other riders manage to develop a winning bike for him?" That sounds a bit...
That's harsh.
Yeah, that's a bit judgmental.
Yes, harsh and judgmental, and I think also wrong in that it's... they are getting a lot out of Acosta, because Acosta is pushing the bike. He is helping to develop the bike. The bike is working for him, and he's still best. I think he's still best. Best KTM in the jam in the standings. Yes,
by 3 places. Yeah, exactly.
P8, I think.
And I mean, I can understand the sort of frustration at Acosta throwing it down the road quite a few times, but I think when you look at his performance at, say, I don't know, Silverstone, Pit Barrow was saying in, I think, an interview over the weekend that he was just about a second off, or a second and a half off Marc Marquez on the podium at Silverstone, despite qualifying way back on the grid. That was a really good ride. I mean, he was the first non-Ducati in Aragon. That was a really good performance as well. Netherlands, he was up there in the podium fight up until, maybe 4 or 5 laps to go. Another really strong performance. So I think we are seeing a decent level from Pedro. The bike just clearly isn't at the level of the Ducatis. And yes, he is crashing too much this year. But I think, you want your rider to be having a go rather than just riding around.
It was interesting, our friend and colleague Jack Appleyard asking Pit Byrer on the broadcast, I think it was on Saturday morning, or maybe even Friday. I can't remember when. But he was saying to Pit, what do you think of Pedro's antics? Kind of almost publicly courting VR46, being a bit loose with some of his comments. He was semi-critical again of KTM in the debrief this weekend, saying, I'm waiting for them to make a step with the bike or to bring a better bike. But other than that, he's actually sort of calmed down a little bit. Yep. He's been he hasn't been throwing sort of too many grenades, you could say.
Yeah, and he's not showing up with a face like a slapped behind, as one of our Patreon comments, or one of our patrons commented on a couple of rounds ago. And I think there has been I think we mentioned this after the Assen race, but it seems as though there's been an internal conversation between Pedro and his bosses, and
his management.
And his management as well, I'm sure. And it's probably been told to him that, hey, you best make the best out of this situation, because no matter how grumpy you look, it's not going to change. It's not going to change the bike you're on until the end of the year.
This time next year, Dave, silly season's going to be going mad for 2027. I mean,
this time next year, or it
maybe
does seem to have calmed down with Martin looking like Martin will be staying with Aprilia. And
that was one big story from this weekend as well.
Yeah, it was a massive story. It does seem like Martin will be staying. That throws everything up in the air, because perhaps it brings everything back down out of the air, because it looked like there could be lots and lots of changes, and there won't be now. There might be some Moto2 riders coming up from for MotoGP, but apart from Toprak, there's not really. It doesn't look like there's going to be an awful lot of change.
Very quickly on that, Neil, does it seem quite trite that after all of this mess, Jorge Martin might be an Aprilia rider again in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just an acceptance of the situation, and that maybe staying at Aprilia in the last couple of weeks has appeared not such a terrible thing. Marco Bezzecchi, I think, has proved that. And yeah, I mean, it's a massive U-turn in his behalf. Big red face. I mean, It's going to be very fun seeing him in the media on Thursday in Brno. I'm particularly
Really
looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's really, really done some serious damage to his reputation. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's from a sporting aspect. It's not the end of the world for him.
Dave, as a man who's eaten quite a bit of humble pie in your life, what do you think about the situation?
I mean, I think it's the best situation. I mean, I'm much more interested in why he wanted to leave. That is the one question that we have never had a decent answer to, and that's what I'm really looking forward to asking him in Brno.
Hire and fire. I'm going to go first. I'm going to say, maybe somewhat controversially, Diogo Moreira. This was the first time he's classified out of the top 5, in 8 GPs. He's also been on the podium in the last 3 of the last 4, and he started 4th to last on the grid, but still managed to come all the way through. Now, Jake Dixon was very withering of some of his passing attempts, as we can see in the race, and we have to talk about how he came back onto the track and had that sort of horrific collision, of course, with David Alonso. But
David Alonso.
Okay, fucking hell. But is there? You made me lose my thread now. But I mean, I think the ability of the rider, 21 years old again, was on display. I mean, was there anyone more kind of electric in that category, just showing their ability, and especially in a race where Manuel Gonzalez might count himself lucky to grab the points he did today?
Yeah, I mean, it was a brilliant performance from Moreira up until he attempted that pass on Jake Dixon. It was Marc Marquez-esque, I might say, when you think back to Marc's escapades in Moto2, when he nearly stalled it in the grid in Japan, came from the back, when he started from the back of the grid in Valencia and still won the race. And to do it here at a Sachsenring, which is so difficult to overtake. And I was thinking, after a couple of laps, like, he must be doing some serious damage to his tires. But he was, catching Dixon, and it was like he was in too much of a rush to try and overtake. And I think his inexperience showed in that particular instance. And then what he did coming back onto the track, I wouldn't say it's maybe unforgivable, but the consequences of that could have been so grave, not just for David Alonso, but for himself. And I have to say, I think, race direction and, I think the FIM stewards got it absolutely spot on in being super harsh with him. If the chances of a move are of killing someone, then you have to be as tough as you possibly can. And, a pit lane start for the next race, I think is, falls in line with what happened.
Is there also, just to again play devil's advocate, because I agree with everything you said, Neil, but is there also the fact that where he was on the track, there was not exactly a great deal of space for him to get back on the tarmac, because otherwise he would be going through the grass, which is what he should have done. But in the heat of the moment, I don't know. I mean, somebody, I can't remember who it was, ahead of David Alonso, managed to veer and miss him. Alonso was committed to the curve, so of course we had that sickening collision. But I don't think Moreira was being ridiculously reckless in doing that because of his options.
Yeah, and there is an argument to be made that the majority of riders in that situation, they're thinking, how can I get back onto the track as quick as possible? And he's obviously had this amazing comeback, and he's probably thinking, I could still salvage something from this situation. But frankly, you have to look over your shoulder. You have to be a bit more careful about coming back on, and it is a very awkward place to do that. But still, with potential repercussions being so grave, I think you have to really punish this guy. The
problem with the Sachsenring is that you're spending so much time on the left side. There are so many left corners that if you go off to the left of the track, then it becomes there's very few places you can safely rejoin where you're not going to be in the path of someone else. But yeah, completely agree. Moreira was out of line. He should have looked back. He should have looked a little bit more carefully. It was difficult. It's also difficult because of where it was, but that doesn't absolve him from the fact that, yes, you're allowed to rejoin, but you have to rejoin safely.
That kind of cues you up for your category if we want to skip into fire, right?
Yeah, because my fire was Diogo Moreira. Although I was just doing that in a slightly tongue-in-cheek way to kind of jibe you. But yeah, I mean, it was... from going from the absolute highs of his performance to that reckless thing, that reckless action. Yeah, I mean, it was very scary. And, thankfully, David Alonso, a colleague, caught up with him after the race, and obviously very sore, but relatively okay. So, minor miracle there that something more serious didn't happen.
Why am I being jibed with you after I bought you a nice curry dinner in the Prince of Punjab restaurant last night? Just baiting me. I don't know what I've done wrong, Dave. Acts of kindness just don't go rewarded.
They certainly don't where you're concerned, Adam.
Just before we get to your high, Dave, can I just take a quick tangent for a moment? Because the scrutiny of Sachsenring as a safe circuit came under the microscope. It was something that I think you asked Marc Marquez about, or somebody did in the press conference. Some of his comments were that there's been requests to move the walls back or to give a bit more runoff or a bit more space, but there's only so much you can do here.
Yeah, I mean, the places where they need the space, like turn 5, turn 7, 8, 9, turn 7, 8, those places, there is room, but then you start encroaching on paddock 2, the paddock on the other side of the track. So it could be done. There are other places where you just can't do it because you're right up against the land which the circuit just doesn't own. So it's tricky. But and again, turn 1. I mean, turn 1, you're basically up against the hill and up against the top of sort of the entrance of turn 10. So there's a few places where it's difficult. They might need to make a little bit more space, but then also I think we need to wait until I can't remember if it was Marco Bezzecchi or one of the riders was saying, look, we're going 10, 20 kilometers an hour faster than we were 10 years ago. We're cornering faster. We're braking faster. We're just running out. They made changes at Jerez, which was good, which made it a lot safer. They could maybe make a couple of changes here, but also we need to see what the 2027 rules bring, how that changes things. But that might give the Sachsenring sort of breathing space and a little bit of room to think about, okay, might need to change this, might need to change that.
The good thing is that the accident hotspots are usually where the riders are fully cranked over, so the crashes are relatively slow. I mean, they're stopping in the gravel just before they get, but then some of the fast parts, I think, like turn 8 at the bottom where Morbidelli crashed, and turn 11, that is a corner that does have the runoff.
Yes.
I think we've seen crashes there. Tony Arbolino, I think in Moto2, demonstrating as well that you can go off at quite a high speed and still be relatively okay.
Yeah, the trouble with crashing at turn 11 is you're going fast, and you wash the front, you're going through the gravel, but you're going downhill, so you're getting a lot less sort of deceleration. Nothing you can do about it.
Dave, who's your higher nomination?
My high, well, I mean, realistically, my higher, everyone's higher should be Marc Marquez, because if you're racing at the Sachsenring, there's literally no point in putting anyone else on a motorbike. But I'm going to miss that and give his brother, Alex Marquez, who just had a much better weekend than he had any right to expect. He's doing a much better job than anyone else. He is second in the championship. He's clearly the second best rider in the world at the moment. He is outperforming people in stronger teams with more support and on nominally better or theoretically better machinery, and yet he's there every week. And again, like Pecco Bagnaia says, doesn't matter where he starts, he finishes third. Doesn't matter where Alex Marquez starts, he always finishes second.
Neil Emmett, are you still going to take Davy's position as the contrarian for your higher nomination?
Well, how about you do your fire first, Ad?
Right, there we go. I tried to tee it up. Just playing the ball into old Darwin Nunez over here. My fire was Marco Bezzecchi. I mean, that was a howler. I mean, that was a simplistic podium. You should have put another one in the pocket, but...
Tell us your real reason.
No, I'm just a bit fed up.
You took the half.
Yeah, I'm a bit fed up with the Italian. I think his general lack of wanting to engage or play the game as a factory rider, a representative of a company that put millions into this sport and into promotion it, into advancing their technology, just doesn't want to do that slither of the job that is provide the media with some decent material, honest material. I mean, even people like Alex Rins and Fabio Quartararo, who are utterly fed up, can come and explain, what's going on in their lives and their side of the stories. And Bezzecchi isn't interested. So I just think, why waste? I'm not going to waste my time if he doesn't want to sort of waste his. If he wants to waste his time, so.
The problem with Marco Bezzecchi is he doesn't suffer fools gladly, and he has to speak to a bunch of fools every weekend.
I'm going to turn the mirror on him. Then.
But he should have a little bit. He should have a little bit more tolerance. We're not at all as observant as Marco Bezzecchi.
Yeah, a general conduct thing.
Right. Well, it's funny you should say that, Ed, because my hire was actually Marco Bezzecchi. Because, he dumped it out of a potential second position. But this was just a really strong round overall. I think Massimo Rivola said on Saturday, okay, it's a little disappointing to lose the sprint on the final lap, but the fact that we were pushing Marc Marquez at the Sachsenring in conditions that normally Marc Marquez calls his own is quite an achievement. And again, for him to be up there on the Sunday in totally different conditions, super competitive, showing podium potential, I think bodes really well. And looking at his last 5 rounds, I mean, he won at Silverstone. He was 8th in Aragon in both the sprint and the feature race when he qualified, 20th? He was the first non-Ducati at Mugello, pushed Marc all the way at Assen, and, another really strong weekend here. It's just a really good run that he's on. And, shows that in the right hands, Aprilia is a competitive package.
But at 3 p.m. today, the team has to put the fairing in the bin. So
it's a fair point. It's a very fair point.
Let's do our grades for the Grand Prix. How are we feeling numerically, Dave?
Well. Sorry, just before we get to that, we want to get on to 1 or 2 Patreon predictions. We always ask our patrons to make some predictions over or before the race weekend gets really revved up. We had 1 or 2 people correctly predicting that Alex Marquez would be the second placed finisher on Sunday. We didn't actually ask who was going to win. We thought that was too obvious. So Adam Pearce and Nick Saban, congratulations, guys, for doing that. Congrats also to Graham Posson, who correctly predicted that Marc Marquez would have the race won, lap 1, turn 1. And he did.
There are a few more categories as well. Was that how many times did we have a prediction that Dave was going to get wet on his motorcycle? What was the number?
0.
You weren't riding in any rain whatsoever?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there we go. That was a bit of a shock.
Yes, it was a bit of a shock because it did keep on sort of raining on and off. Even on Saturday, coming and going, I managed to be in the dry.
Dave, I apologise for my poor housekeeping. Can I put you on the spot and also say, how are things looking in the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League?
Well, the top 3 of the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League are first is Team Red Rocket with 2,072.5 points, which seems like quite a lot. Second is BWE Team, and the third is Capitan BCV Racing. Steve leads the internal Paddock Pass Podcast League. He is in...
Shaking my head.
He's 119th with 1,990 points. Neil is second, 153rd, 1978.5. I boosted Mark, so I made some big strides.
Kept that quiet.
Yeah, my last boost. I'm up to 991st, which is not all that good, but still. I've got 1,819 points, and the less said about Adam Wheeler, the better.
Yes, my team was obliterated by having Maverick in there, and then also
forgetting to change it.
No, but Didier was having a decent GP. I had high hopes for him. So that 2-degree lean angle and 5 extra meters braking just
he should have been somebody's fire.
Yeah.
Yes,
somebody, some clever clogs swapped Fabio Quartararo out for Johan Zarco, and is living to tell the tale. Or sorry, is living to pay the price for that. Steve English going ahead of me. Yeah.
Yes. All right then. Well, let's conclude things with the grades. We've mentioned everything. Yeah, I think just a mention as well for all our patrons, people who've been listening to our paddock note shows throughout the weekend. We've been recording some pretty informative podcasts, if we do say so ourselves, on Friday and Saturday. So if you are a patron and you want to know a little bit more about what exactly was going on in detail at the German Grand Prix, then sign up, be a paddock insider, expert or VIP, and you can get access to those particular podcasts. But Dave, grades.
My grade is again going to be in multiple parts. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, but that's going to be basically 10 out of 10 for the event because it's a fantastic event, one of the best events on the calendar. That is going to be, I would say, 7 out of 10 for the sprint race because it was pretty good. The rain certainly livened it up, and 1 out of 10 for the main race because it was absolutely dire. I mean, like I was literally wanting to go off and do other things.
I'm not sure what kind of average does that make? A 1, 10 and a 7?
Yeah, I'm calling it a 7 just because I can't be bothered to do the maths.
Right, okay. Neil?
A 6, I'll give it. Agree with Dave. Good sprint on Saturday. Great crowd, cool event. I've had a nice weekend, but I feel that there's maybe been a few too many MotoGP rounds in the last couple of months, and I'm ready for a bit of a...
Oh, he's jaded.
Bit of a pit stop. Also, 5th time this year that Pecco's been 3rd, 6th time this year Alex has been 2nd, 7th time this year Marc's been 1st. It wasn't as if we had the most varied podium ever. So, it was slightly repetitive, and the race was quite dull.
Yeah, I completely agree with those. I'm going to say a 7. I don't understand why this event is sold out. We can barely get a crowd at Silverstone. Even though we had 2 British riders on pole position this weekend, the Germans don't have anybody. In any class, but they still turn up. I mean, Dorna announced another record attendance of almost like 250,000 people. I'm not going to go into figures, Dave, don't worry. But it was 98,000, I think, today for a race day attendance. It looks incredibly busy out there. I would always take one mark off at Sachsenring because it's such a patchwork quilt of a circuit. Yep. I mean, it's so bizarre. And also walking in, you don't get the finest impression that this is elite motorsport.
Yeah, because we're on the edge of an industrial estate.
There is history here, and it is part of its charm. So I don't want to put the boot in, but then by the same token, maybe Liberty Media walking in will think, well, what on earth have we bought into here?
Yeah, but they have to. This is the heart of German motorsport or motorcycle racing. Anyway, lots of the teams. There's a few teams who are from around here. Riders are from around here. A lot of the Germans who work in the paddock are from around here. It has a history of racing. It's also close to, for example, Poland, Scandinavia, Denmark. There's Danish people come, Danish fans, Swedish fans, Norwegian fans, Finnish fans. It's very close for them. It's relatively affordable, even though it's quite difficult to actually get accommodation. But yeah, this is, and it's one of the few places where actually one of the few German circuits which is actually homologated for the FIM for MotoGP. World Superbikes have tried racing at the Nürburgring and nobody turned up. There's the same problem I think at Hockenheim, and they've changed those tracks so many times. There's 1 or 2 other tracks around in this region which are much more soulless. But I think also the proximity to the small town of Hohenstein, the fact that you can get on, you can get on a train in Chemnitz or whatever, jump off. I think one of our fellow journalists was commuting from Leipzig. The fact that you can do that, it really makes it an attractive venue to come to, and it's an event like Assen is an event.
Yeah, I mean, full credit to the club and also the German fans, the way they are passionate about having relatively little to cheer in terms of, I mean, they are the contradiction to that you need a home rider to have popularity sort of phase.
You need a great event, and it's a great event.
Just before we go, are we happy that it looks like there's going to be a new 5-year contract? That's the talk. They're on the verge of agreeing another 5 years at Sachsenring.
Yeah, but I'm very happy to come here. I like it.
There we go. This has been the Paddock Pass podcast from the German Grand Prix. Thank you to renthal.com and also to Pole Position Travel. If you like, then comment. Say nice things, of course, and we'll try to reply. And also join us on Patreon because we'll be back with a Superbike show from Donington Park, as well as our first paddock notes from the Czech Republic next Thursday. Thanks for listening, everyone.